Champagne dripped from my face as 200 wedding guests watched in stunned silence. I'm Eddie Johnson, and my daughter's new husband just humiliated me at their reception. Preston poured expensive champagne over my head, told everyone I was just a pathetic janitor who didn't belong with real people. What he didn't know? I'd been secretly paying his medical school bills for 4 years. Every penny came from my dead wife's life insurance money. I stood there, champagne still dripping, and reached for my phone. One call would destroy everything he'd worked for. This is what happened when kindness met entitlement, and why you should never assume the quiet person in the corner doesn't have power. If this story intrigues you, hit subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Because sometimes the person you underestimate the most is holding all the cards. The trouble started the moment I walked into Riverside Country Club. $15,000 they paid for this venue. I know because Sarah showed me the contract, worried about the cost. I told her not to worry, that her happiness was worth everything. What I didn't tell her was that $15,000 represented exactly 1 month of scholarship payments I'd been making to ensure her future husband became a doctor. The valet looked at my car, a 2018 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles, like I'd driven up in a garbage truck. "Sir, are you here for the Johnson-Hayes wedding?" His tone suggested I might be lost. "I'm the bride's father." His face went red. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson. Right this way." Inside, the coat check girl held my jacket like it might contaminate her fingers. $29 at Target, and I was proud of it. Clean, pressed, appropriate. But next to the groomsmen's $3,000 Armani tuxedos, I might as well have worn overalls. Preston's father, Dr. Hayes Sr., approached with that practiced smile doctors use before delivering bad news. "Eddie, so glad you could make it." His handshake was firm, calculated to assert dominance. "You must be so proud. Medical school, residency at Johns Hopkins. Preston's really made something of himself." "He sure has," I said quietly. What Dr. Hayes didn't know was that I'd been watching Preston's progress through quarterly scholarship reports. GPA, 3.8, clinical performance, exemplary, character assessment pending. The groomsmen clustered nearby, comparing watches and talking about golf handicaps. One of them, a pharmaceutical sales rep named Bradley, stage whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Can you believe Sarah's dad is a janitor? At a children's hospital, no less. Preston must really love her." Another groomsman snorted, "Love doesn't pay for country club memberships." I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed calm. Margaret always said you judge a man's character not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those he thinks are beneath him. Preston himself swept over, all smiles and charm in his Italian silk bow tie. At 28, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Eddie, looking sharp. His eyes took in my target suit with barely concealed amusement. "Sarah's getting ready upstairs. She's nervous but excited." "She should be. Biggest day of her life." "Absolutely, though I have to ask." Preston's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did you need help with a better suit? I mean, for the photos and everything. I could have my tailor." "This suit is fine, Preston." Of course. I just meant, well, image matters in medicine. People judge you before you even speak. First impressions and all that." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man whose entire medical education was funded by the very person he was subtly insulting. 4 years of tuition, books, housing, clinical fees. $320,847 in total assistance. Not that he knew. Sarah appeared at the top of the staircase in her grandmother's wedding dress, and for a moment, everyone fell silent. She looked exactly like Margaret on our wedding day 27 years ago. Same radiant smile, same way of lighting up a room. But as I watched Preston's face, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Pride, yes. Love, possibly. But also calculation. The way he positioned himself for photos. The practiced way he accepted congratulations from guests. Everything felt performative. "She's beautiful," I said. "The most beautiful woman in the room," Preston agreed. Then, lowering his voice, "And after tonight she'll be Mrs. Preston Hayes III. Part of a real medical family legacy." That's when I knew we might have a problem. The ceremony went off without a hitch, but the reception was where masks started slipping. I sat at table 12, the family table supposedly, though I noticed Dr. Hayes Sr. had positioned himself as far from me as possible while still maintaining the appearance of inclusion. Sarah had insisted I sit with family, not realizing that to Preston's relatives, I wasn't really family at all. During cocktail hour, I overheard Preston's aunt speaking to her husband near the bar. I still can't believe she's marrying him. Preston, I mean. Lovely girl, but her background... She gestured vaguely in my direction. Hospital janitor? What will people say at the club? Preston knows what he's doing, her husband replied. Pretty girl, and she'll be grateful. Those types always are. Those types. I gripped my champagne flute a little tighter. The truth was, I'd been watching this family for months, ever since Sarah announced the engagement. Old money, medical dynasty, the kind of people who donated wings to hospitals and expected their names on plaques. They saw charity as something you did for tax write-offs, not because you understood what it meant to struggle. But here's what really worried me. If I stayed silent tonight, if I let this pattern continue, what message was I sending Sarah? That it was acceptable for her husband to look down on her father? That love meant tolerating disrespect? More importantly, what would Margaret think? My wife died 5 years ago after a 3-month battle with lung cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. Preston Hayes was a second-year medical student then, doing his clinical rotations at Children's Hospital. He was one of the residents who treated Margaret during her final weeks. He was good to her, gentle, professional. He stayed late to answer my questions, helped me understand treatment options, held my hand when I cried in the hallway after her last chemotherapy session failed. That's why I did what I did with the insurance money. $400,000 from Margaret's life insurance policy. Her final gift to me, money meant to secure my future. Instead, I used it to create the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund, an anonymous scholarship program administered through City National Bank. Designed to help promising medical students complete their education, Preston Hayes was the fund's first and only recipient. I told myself I was honoring Margaret's memory by helping train the next generation of compassionate doctors. Preston had shown such kindness during her treatment, such dedication. I thought I was investing in character, not just education. But now, watching him work the room, accepting congratulations like he'd earned everything himself, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Dad, you okay? Sarah appeared beside me, radiant in her grandmother's dress. You look worried. Just thinking about your mom. She would have loved this. Sarah's eyes misted. She would have loved Preston too. He's going to be a wonderful husband. I hoped she was right. But marriages built on unequal respect rarely lasted. If Preston truly believed I was beneath his family, how long before he started seeing Sarah the same way? How long before my daughter's worth became measured by her husband's standards? Sarah, honey, can I ask you something? Anything, Dad? Has Preston ever said anything about me? About my job? She hesitated just long enough to confirm my fears. Dad, Preston respects you. He knows how hard you work. That's not what I asked. He comes from a different world. Give him time. Time. How much time does a man need to show basic respect? 28 years wasn't enough? I thought about the briefcase in my car. Inside were documents that could change everything. Scholarship agreements, bank statements, Margaret's death certificate. Proof that the lowly janitor had been the silent benefactor behind Preston's entire medical career. But using that information would mean revealing the secret I'd kept for 4 years. It would mean admitting that every dollar in Preston's education account came from the life insurance payout of a woman he'd helped care for. It would mean showing Sarah that her father wasn't the simple working man everyone assumed. Was I ready for that conversation? More importantly, was I prepared to watch my daughter marry someone who fundamentally disrespected the man who'd made his career possible? The band struck up the first dance, and I watched Preston lead Sarah onto the floor. They moved together beautifully, lost in each other's eyes. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then Preston's best man grabbed the microphone for his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I've known Preston since Harvard Medical School, and I can honestly say he's everything you'd want in a doctor. Brilliant, dedicated, and most importantly, he knows quality when he sees it. He gestured toward Sarah. Sarah Johnson is lucky to be joining the Hayes family legacy. Not Sarah Johnson Hayes, not a partnership. Sarah was lucky to join them. That's when I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. The best man's speech ended with polite clapping, but I caught the subtle emphasis on certain words. Sarah was lucky to join their family. Preston was elevating her station. Classic rich family language disguised as compliments. Dr. Hayes Sr. approached our table during the salad course, wine glass in hand and confidence radiating from every gesture. Eddie, I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me for what? For raising such a wonderful daughter. Sarah's going to fit right into our family. He paused, swirling his wine. Of course, there will be adjustments. Medical families have certain expectations, social obligations, but I'm sure she'll adapt beautifully. She doesn't need to adapt to anything. She's perfect as she is. Dr. Hayes smiled that practiced smile again, naturally. I just meant the lifestyle differences. Country club memberships, medical association events, charity galas. It's a different world from what she's used to. Different from what I'm used to, you mean? Well, yes. Your background is more practical, which has its own value, of course. I set down my fork carefully. What kind of value would that be, Doctor? Hard work, dedication, the backbone of America. His tone was the verbal equivalent of patting me on the head. Preston and Sarah are lucky to have that grounding influence. Translation, I was useful as long as I stayed in my lane. Preston appeared beside his father, loosening his bow tie slightly. The champagne was clearly having an effect. His cheeks were flushed, his movements a bit looser than before. Dad, what are you two talking about? Just getting to know my new co-father-in-law, Dr. Hayes said smoothly. Eddie was telling me about his work at the hospital. Right, the maintenance job. Preston's smile was perfectly pleasant and completely condescending. That's actually how we met, Sarah and I. She was visiting someone in pediatrics, and Eddie was... What were you doing that day? Mopping. Cleaning the nurse's station. See? Hard-working, salt of the earth. Preston clapped me on the shoulder like I was a golden retriever. We need people like you, Eddie. Society can't function without folks willing to do the jobs others won't. The jobs others won't. I felt something shift inside my chest. A familiar anger, but colder now. More focused. Preston, can I ask you something? Shoot. How did you pay for medical school? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Scholarships, mostly? Merit-based? Why? Which scholarships? The Hayes Excellence Scholarship, primarily. Family Foundation stuff. Academic achievement awards. He waved his hand dismissively. Boring financial details. Must have been substantial. Medical school's expensive. $320,000, give or take. Preston's chest puffed slightly with pride. But when you've got the grades and the family connections, doors open. Family connections. I almost laughed. Dr. Hayes rejoined the conversation, apparently sensing tension. Preston's always been brilliant. Youngest in his class. Highest MCAT scores. The scholarship committee recognized natural talent. What scholarship committee? I asked quietly. City National Bank manages the fund, Preston said. Anonymous donor, apparently. Someone who believes in investing in future doctors. Anonymous. Rich people like their tax write-offs private, Dr. Hayes added with a knowing chuckle. Probably some pharmaceutical company looking for good PR. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. City National Bank app, already logged in. Account balance visible. $198,247.83 remaining in the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Interesting, I said, showing Preston the screen. What do you think this account is for? Preston squinted at the phone, champagne making his focus sluggish. Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Probably another scholarship program. Common name, Johnson. Very common, I agreed. Wait. Preston's expression shifted slightly. Johnson. That's Sarah's maiden name. It is. And your wife was... Margaret Johnson. She died 5 years ago. The color drained from Preston's face as the implications hit him. Dr. Hayes leaned in, trying to see the phone screen. I don't understand, Preston said slowly. The scholarship that paid for your education? The anonymous donor? I kept my voice perfectly level. That was my wife's life insurance money. Silence. Complete, absolute silence at our table. Preston stared at the phone screen, then at me, then back at the screen. That's impossible. Is it? You're a janitor. I clean floors at Children's Hospital. Same hospital where you did your residency. Same hospital where you treated my wife during her final months. Dr. Hayes grabbed Preston's arm. Son, what is he talking about? I remember her, Preston whispered. Margaret Johnson. Room 314. Lung cancer. Stage 4. You were very kind to her. And to me. Preston's hands started shaking slightly. But the scholarship, you don't have that kind of money. $400,000 in life insurance. Every penny went into that fund. Why? The word came out strangled. Because you were good to her. Because I thought you understood what it meant to care for people who were suffering. I stood up slowly, phone still in hand. Around us, other guests continued their conversations, oblivious to the earthquake happening at table 12. You called my work jobs others won't do, Preston. But I chose that job. I chose it because cleaning those floors meant being close to the doctors and nurses who tried to save my wife, because it meant contributing something, even if it was just keeping their workspace clean. Preston was staring at me now with something approaching horror. And I chose to fund your education because I believed the man who held my hand in that hospital corridor would become the kind of doctor who never forgot where compassion comes from. I picked up my champagne glass. Cheap sparkling wine, not the Dom Perignon they'd served the Hayes family table. Seems I was wrong about a lot of things. Preston sat frozen, staring at my phone screen like it contained nuclear launch codes. Dr. Hayes kept glancing between us, trying to process what he'd just heard. There has to be some mistake, Dr. Hayes said finally. The scholarship committee told us the donor was a pharmaceutical company. The committee was instructed to protect donor anonymity, I replied calmly. Standard practice for memorial funds. I could see Preston's mind racing, trying to reconcile his assumptions with reality. His father-in-law, the man he'd been subtly insulting all evening, had personally funded his entire medical career. Sarah approached our table, sensing the tension. Is everything okay here? You all look like someone died. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. We're fine, sweetheart, I said. Just discussing Preston's scholarship program. Oh, the Hayes Excellence thing? Dad, isn't it amazing how these programs help deserving students? Sarah's smile was radiant, completely unaware of the bomb that had just exploded at her wedding reception. Deserving, I repeated quietly. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat, apparently deciding damage control was necessary. Eddie, I think there might be some confusion here. Medical education funding is complex. Multiple sources, various foundations. No confusion, doctor. I have all the documentation in my car. Documentation? Bank records, scholarship agreements, transfer authorizations. I paused, letting that sink in. Margaret's death certificate. Preston's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound drew attention from nearby tables, guests turning to look at our little drama. Careful there, son, Dr. Hayes said, his voice tight with forced cheer. Nervous groom syndrome. A server appeared immediately to clean up the glass, and I noticed something interesting. As she knelt to gather the pieces, both Preston and his father stepped back automatically, as if her presence might contaminate them. The same reaction they'd had to me. Thank you, I said to the server. That was very kind. She looked up, surprised. Most guests didn't acknowledge service staff. Just doing my job, sir. Important work, keeping everyone safe. Preston watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He was starting to see the parallels. Hospital Administrator Janet Miller chose that moment to approach our table. I'd worked with Janet for 15 years, and she'd always treated me with genuine respect. Eddie, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. She gave me a warm hug. How's retirement treating you? Preston's head snapped up. Retirement? Eddie didn't tell you? After 15 years as head of facilities management, he's finally taking some time for himself. Janet beamed at me proudly. Best facilities director we ever had. The man could run that hospital blindfolded. Facilities director? Dr. Hayes sounded confused. Oh, yes. Eddie managed a staff of 43, oversaw a $2 million maintenance budget, implemented the new waste management protocols that saved the hospital $600,000 annually. Janet paused, noticing the strange looks around the table. I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? No, I said quietly. They just assumed I was a janitor. The truth was more complicated. I had started as a night janitor 15 years ago, working my way up through determination and competence. But somewhere along the way, people stopped seeing the progression. They saw a man in work clothes and made assumptions. Even Preston, who'd worked in that hospital for 2 years, had never bothered to learn my actual title. Well, Janet continued, retirement suits you. Though we miss having someone who actually cared about the place. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, the new guy couldn't organize a 2-car parade. After Janet left, our table fell into uncomfortable silence. Preston stared at his hands, processing the revelation that his assumptions about my capabilities had been as wrong as his assumptions about my financial situation. Facilities director, Dr. Hayes murmured. $2 million budget. Still just hospital work, I said evenly. Still the kind of job you think is beneath your family. Preston finally looked up, his face pale. Eddie, I didn't mean... What didn't you mean, Preston? I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw what you wanted to see. Sarah was looking confused now, sensing undercurrents she couldn't identify. What's going on here? Why does everyone look so serious? I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. The evening was still young. Just getting to know each other better, sweetheart. The DJ announced it was time for the father-daughter dance, and Sarah's face lit up with pure joy. She grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the dance floor as the opening notes of My Girl began to play, the same song Margaret and I had danced to at our own wedding. As we swayed together, I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching us. Sarah looked radiant, completely happy, unaware that her new husband had spent the evening systematically insulting the man who'd made his career possible. "Dad, this is perfect," she whispered. "Mom would have loved this song. She would have loved seeing you this happy." Preston makes me happy. I know he seems a little formal tonight, but wedding stress, you know? He's actually really sweet when it's just us. I hoped that was true. I hoped the man I'd observed tonight was an aberration, brought out by family pressure and alcohol. But Margaret had always said, when people show you who they are, believe them. The song ended, and tradition dictated that Preston cut in for the next dance. As I stepped back, he moved forward with that practiced smile. "Mind if I steal her back? She's all yours." But as I started to leave the dance floor, Preston caught my arm. "Eddie, wait, about our conversation earlier. Not here, Preston. This is Sarah's moment. I just want to clear the air. I think there's been some misunderstanding." Sarah looked between us, confused. What misunderstanding? Other guests had gathered around the dance floor's edge, watching the newlyweds with champagne glasses raised. Preston's groomsmen clustered nearby, along with both sets of parents and various relatives. A perfect audience. "Preston, please," I said quietly. "Let's talk later." "No, I think this needs to be addressed now." Preston's voice carried that slight slur of someone who'd been drinking steadily for 3 hours. "There seems to be some confusion about my scholarship funding." My blood ran cold. He was going to do this here in front of everyone. "Preston," I warned. "Eddie claims he funded my medical education through some memorial scholarship." Preston's voice got louder, drawing more attention, which is obviously impossible. Sarah's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Hayes stepped forward, clearly sensing disaster. "Son, maybe we should—" "No, Dad, this is important." Preston turned to address the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to clear up a misunderstanding. My father-in-law has been telling people he paid for my medical school, which is frankly ridiculous." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah looked mortified. "Preston, stop," she pleaded. "I earned my scholarship through academic merit, not charity from a janitor." The word came out like a slur. "I appreciate Eddie's contributions to society, but let's be realistic about who belongs where." The crowd was dead silent now. Even the band had stopped playing. I felt something break inside me. Not snap. That would have been violent. This was more like ice finally giving way under too much pressure. "Preston," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "you should stop talking now." "Why? Because the truth is uncomfortable?" Preston was fully committed now, his inhibitions dissolved by alcohol and adrenaline. "Look, Eddie, I respect what you do. Society needs people willing to clean up after others, but don't pretend you're something you're not." He grabbed a fresh champagne flute from a passing server's tray. Dom Perignon, the expensive stuff reserved for toasts. "This is Dom Perignon 2014, he announced to the crowd. $280 a bottle. This reception cost more than most people make in a month. The Hayes family has been supporting medical education for 3 generations. He held the glass high, champagne bubbling golden in the ballroom lights. "So let's be honest about who really belongs at this level of society." That's when he did it. Preston Hayes III, Harvard-educated doctor, devoted son-in-law, poured an entire glass of $280 champagne over my head. The liquid was cold, shocking, running down my face and soaking into my $29 Target suit. 200 wedding guests stood in absolute silence, watching champagne drip from my nose onto the polished marble floor. "You don't belong here," Preston said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "You never did." Sarah made a sound like she'd been physically struck. Several guests gasped audibly. Dr. Hayes looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I stood there, champagne dripping, feeling the weight of every stare in the room. Some faces showed shock, others embarrassment, a few showed the cruel satisfaction of witnessing someone else's humiliation. But I didn't move, didn't react, didn't give Preston or his family the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was slightly wet, but functional. "Preston," I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying despite the whisper-level volume. "You mentioned my scholarship claim was impossible. Completely ridiculous." I held up the phone, showing the City National Bank app. Account balance clearly visible, $198,247.83. Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund, managed by City National Bank. Established May 15, 2019, with a $400,000 initial deposit from Colonial Life Insurance Company. Preston's confident smile started to waver. Scholarship recipient Preston Hayes III. Total disbursements to date, $320,847. The crowd pressed closer, trying to see the phone screen. Someone near the back called out, "What's he showing?" I touched another app icon. A PDF document opened. Official scholarship paperwork with City National letterhead. Scholarship terms: renewable annually based on academic performance and character assessment. Revocable at sole discretion of fund administrator. Preston's face had gone from flushed to gray. Fund administrator, I continued, reading from the document. Edward James Johnson. That's me, Preston. The silence was so complete I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. The janitor you just humiliated? The man who doesn't belong here? I wiped champagne from my cheek with the back of my hand. I've been paying your bills for 4 years. Dr. Hayes made a strangled noise. Sarah was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. Every tuition payment, every book fee, every clinical rotation cost. $320,847 of my wife's life insurance money. I looked around the circle of shocked faces. My wife, Margaret, who died of lung cancer in room 314 at Children's Hospital. The same hospital where Preston did his residency. The same woman he held my hand and cried with me when she died. Preston was swaying slightly, the full horror of his situation finally penetrating his alcohol-clouded brain. So you're right, Preston. Let's be honest about who belongs where. I reached for my briefcase. The click of my briefcase opening echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. 200 guests leaned forward as I pulled out a manila folder. My movements deliberate and unhurried despite the champagne still dripping from my hair. These are the original scholarship documents, I said, holding up the first set of papers. Signed and notarized on May 15, 2019, 3 days after I received Margaret's life insurance payout. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his medical composure finally cracking. Let me see those. I handed him the documents. His hands shook as he read, his face growing paler with each line. This can't be right, he muttered. The scholarship committee told us. The committee was instructed to maintain donor anonymity, I replied calmly. Standard protocol for memorial funds. You never asked who the donor was, Doctor. You just assumed it was someone worthy of your respect. Preston grabbed the papers from his father, scanning them frantically. But the Hayes Excellence Scholarship. Was the cover name you gave it? The actual fund is called the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund. Your scholarship checks came from my wife's death benefit. Sarah's sobs were the only sound in the room as Preston read his own scholarship agreement. His signature was there, clear as day, along with the terms he'd apparently never bothered to fully understand. I pulled out a second folder. These are the bank statements. 4 years of transfers from my account to yours, Preston. Would you like me to read the amounts? No, Preston whispered. September 2020, $47,200. Tuition and fees for your final year of medical school. I could hear guests murmuring behind me, the sound of 200 people doing math in their heads. January 2021, $18,400, clinical rotation fees and medical equipment. Preston's best man looked like he was going to be sick. June 2021, $53,900, first-year residency supplemental funding because hospital salaries don't cover medical school loans. I held up a third folder. Preston, do you remember signing this document? He took it with trembling hands. It was a character assessment form required annually for scholarship renewal. Question 12, I said. How has this scholarship impacted your understanding of service to others? Your answer was quite eloquent. Preston's voice was barely audible as he read his own words aloud. This scholarship has taught me that medicine is about serving all people, regardless of their background or social status. I am humbled by the anonymous donor's generosity and committed to honoring their sacrifice through compassionate care." The irony hung in the air like smoke. Janet Miller pushed through the crowd, having heard the commotion. When she saw the papers in Preston's hands, her expression shifted to recognition. "Oh my God," she said. "Eddie, you're the anonymous donor? The Margaret Johnson Fund?" All eyes turned to her. "I've been processing scholarship payments for 4 years through the hospital's education department. We never knew who—" She looked around the circle of stunned faces. "This fund has helped 8 medical students complete their education. Preston wasn't the only one." 8 students. I'd never told anyone that detail. "The hospital board considers the Margaret Johnson Fund one of our most important educational partnerships," Janet continued. "The donor requirements are incredibly specific. Recipients must demonstrate not just academic excellence, but genuine compassion for patients regardless of their socioeconomic status." She looked directly at Preston. "There's actually a character clause. If a recipient demonstrates behavior inconsistent with the fund's values, support can be terminated immediately." Dr. Hayes grabbed my arm, his composure completely shattered. "Eddie, please, there's been a misunderstanding. Preston doesn't normally—" "Doesn't normally what? Show his true character?" I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my call log. "I have the direct number for Marcus Thompson, the scholarship administrator at City National Bank. Would you like me to call him?" "What would you tell him?" Preston asked, his voice hollow. "That the recipient just demonstrated a fundamental lack of character by publicly humiliating his benefactor at a family gathering." The crowd pressed closer. Someone in the back was recording with their phone. "Eddie, you can't be serious," Dr. Hayes pleaded. "Preston's residency, his career. His career was built on my wife's death benefit, money we saved for our retirement, which became scholarship funding when cancer took her from me." I opened another app on my phone, the bank's loan management system. Preston's student loan account appeared on screen, showing his current balance. $320,847 in deferred payments, I read aloud. "Deferred because of scholarship coverage. If that coverage ends, the full amount becomes immediately payable." Preston's knees buckled slightly. "Immediately?" "Standard loan terms, Preston. You signed that agreement too." Sarah finally found her voice through her tears. "Dad, please." "Don't do this here." "Sweetheart, I didn't choose the time or place. Your husband did that when he decided to pour champagne on my head." Dr. Hayes was frantically trying to process the financial implications. $320,000? Due immediately? Plus accrued interest, plus penalty fees for early termination. I consulted my phone again. Current total obligation, $343,200. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. Several guests gasped audibly. Preston's pharmaceutical rep friend pushed forward. "Eddie, be reasonable. Preston made a mistake, but ending his career over one bad moment." "One bad moment?" I looked around the circle of faces. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was character revealing itself under pressure. I pulled out the final folder, the one I'd hoped never to use. Margaret's medical records from Children's Hospital. 3 months of treatment, 74 days total. Guess which medical resident was assigned to her case during weeks 6 through 12? Preston's face went completely white. Room 314, Oncology Wing. You held her hand during chemotherapy. You explained her treatment options. You cried with me in the hallway when Dr. Martinez told us there was nothing more they could do. My voice remained steady, but I could feel the emotion underneath. You were kind to her, Preston. Professional. Compassionate. That's why I established this scholarship, because I believed the man who comforted a dying woman and her grieving husband understood what medicine was really about. I held up Margaret's death certificate, dated March 15th, 2019. She died on a Tuesday, liver failure, secondary to cancer. Her last words were about how grateful she was for the care she'd received, how proud she was of the young doctors who'd treated her with such Retriesque continued dignity. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. 3 months later, I took her life insurance money meant to secure my future, and created a scholarship program, because I wanted to honor her memory by helping train more doctors like the one who'd been so kind to us. Preston was crying now, mascara-streaked tears mixing with champagne residue on his cheeks. "Eddie, I remember her. She was so brave. She was, and she believed in you." I closed the final folder and placed it back in my briefcase. But the man who poured champagne on his benefactor's head? The man who told 200 people that I don't belong in civilized society? That's not the Dr. Margaret thought she was helping to train. Dr. Hayes made one last desperate attempt. Eddie, please, think about Sarah. Think about their future together. I looked at my daughter, beautiful and heartbroken in her grandmother's wedding dress. I am thinking about Sarah. I'm thinking about what kind of marriage she'll have with a man who fundamentally disrespects her family. I pulled out my phone one final time and opened my contacts list. Marcus Thompson, City National Bank, was right there. Preston, you have exactly 60 seconds to decide how this ends. Preston stood frozen, staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon pointed at his future. The 60-second countdown had begun, though I wasn't actually timing it. Sometimes the threat of action is more powerful than action itself. What do you want me to do? He whispered. I want you to understand consequences. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his medical training kicking in despite the crisis. Eddie, let's discuss this rationally. Preston made a mistake, yes, but destroying his career. I'm not destroying anything, Doctor. I'm simply withdrawing support that was given freely and can be revoked for cause. Sarah moved between us, her wedding dress rustling. Dad, please. I'm begging you. Sweetheart, this isn't about punishment. It's about character. Preston's character? Everyone's character, including mine. I looked around the circle of faces. Wedding guests who'd been enjoying an open bar and elegant dinner, now witnessing the collapse of everything they thought they understood about social hierarchy. For 4 years, I've watched Preston benefit from Margaret's sacrifice without knowing where it came from. Tonight, I learned what he really thinks of people like me. Preston found his voice. Eddie, I was drunk. I was nervous. The pressure from my family. Stop. I held up my hand. Don't blame alcohol. Don't blame pressure. Don't blame your family. You showed me exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. I touched Marcus Thompson's number on my phone screen. The call connected immediately. Marcus, it's Eddie Johnson. Yes, I know it's evening. I'm calling about the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. The crowd leaned in, straining to hear both sides of the conversation. I need to invoke the character clause for recipient Preston Hayes, effective immediately. Even through the phone speaker, Marcus's surprise was audible. Eddie, that's a serious step. Can I ask what precipitated this decision? Public demonstration of behavior fundamentally inconsistent with the fund's values. I see. And you're certain about this course of action? I looked at Preston, who was shaking visibly. I am. Very well, I'll initiate the termination paperwork tonight. All future payments will cease and the recipient's loan deferments will end at midnight. Thank you, Marcus. Eddie, I'm sorry it came to this. Your wife would be proud of how you've honored her memory. I ended the call and put the phone back in my pocket. It's done. Preston collapsed into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. $340,000, due immediately, plus interest accruing daily. Dr. Hayes was frantically calculating. We can cover some of it, but that amount, Preston, your residency salary won't even touch the monthly payments. There won't be a residency, I said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at me. Janet, you handle hospital credentialing. What happens when a resident's educational funding is revoked for character issues? Janet looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. The hospital reviews the circumstances. If character is in question, they typically terminate the residency program participation. How long does that review take? Usually 48 hours. Preston's best man grabbed his arm. They can't just fire you over a loan issue. This isn't a loan issue, Janet corrected. This is a character assessment issue. Hospitals can't risk residents who demonstrate poor judgment or unprofessional behavior. I opened my briefcase again and pulled out a business card. Preston, this is Dr. Amanda Rodriguez's card. She's a financial counselor who specializes in medical education debt crisis. Preston took the card with trembling fingers. She helped another scholarship recipient navigate a similar situation 3 years ago. Another recipient? Student number 4. Demonstrated similar character issues during his pediatric rotation. Spoke dismissively about patients' families based on their socioeconomic status. The crowd was silent, processing this revelation. What happened to him? Dr. Hayes asked. He found work in medical research, lower pay than clinical practice, but steady income. It took him 7 years to pay off his loans, but he managed. Preston looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. 7 years? If he lives very, very carefully. No country club memberships, no expensive cars, no $280 champagne. The irony of referencing the champagne currently drying in my hair wasn't lost on anyone. Sarah sat down heavily in a chair beside Preston. What does this mean for us? That depends on what kind of man you married, I said gently. Preston finally looked directly at me. Eddie, if there was some way to make this right, Preston, the scholarship is gone. That decision is final. But if I could prove I've learned from this... I studied his face, looking for genuine remorse rather than just panic about consequences. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund will continue to support other medical students who understand that compassion isn't conditional on social status. And me? You'll figure out how to be the doctor my wife thought you could become, just without her financial support. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. Eddie, I want to apologize for my family's behavior tonight. Your apology isn't necessary, Doctor. Your son's choices are his own. I closed my briefcase and stood up, champagne finally done dripping from my suit. Sarah, sweetheart, I love you. That will never change, regardless of who you choose to build your life with. She stood and hugged me fiercely, her wedding dress staining with Dom Perignon residue. I love you too, Dad. I looked at Preston one final time. The man who comforted my dying wife is still in there somewhere. Find him. Then I walked toward the exit, leaving behind 200 silent wedding guests and one very expensive lesson about respect. The phone calls started before I even reached my car. Dr. Rodriguez, the financial counselor, called first. Eddie, I just heard from Marcus Thompson. Another scholarship revocation? Character clause violation. Same pattern as the pediatric resident? Worse, public humiliation of the benefactor. She sighed. I'll reach out to the family tomorrow. Emergency financial counseling session. They'll need it. Janet Miller called next. Eddie, I have to ask, are you certain about this decision? Preston's residency review is automatic now. I'm certain. The hospital board will want details. Tell them to call me Monday morning. I have documentation. This is going to create quite a stir in the medical community. Good. Maybe other scholarship recipients will think twice about their behavior. The third call came from someone unexpected. Dr. Martinez, the oncologist who'd treated Margaret. Eddie, I just heard through the hospital grapevine. Is it true you've been funding medical education scholarships? It is. In Margaret's name? Yes. She would be proud, but also heartbroken about tonight. She would have been disappointed in Preston's behavior, and proud of your response, measured but firm. By Sunday morning, the story had spread through social media. Someone at the wedding had recorded the scholarship revelation, and the video was trending on 3 platforms. Wedding groom humiliates father-in-law, discovers he's been paying his medical school bills, had been viewed 2.3 million times. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. This is why you treat everyone with respect. Imagine pouring champagne on the man who funded your entire career. The quiet dignity of this father is everything. But there were also critics. Destroying someone's career over wedding drama seems excessive. Rich people games with poor people consequences. Both sides were wrong here. I didn't engage with any of it. Social media validation wasn't the point. Monday brought more serious consequences. Preston's residency was officially suspended pending investigation. The hospital's decision was swift and unambiguous. Character issues could not be overlooked in medical training. Dr. Hayes Sr. called that afternoon. Eddie, I need to ask, is there any possibility of reversing this decision? None. Preston is seeing a counselor. He's genuinely remorseful. I'm sure he is. $340,000 in debt tends to inspire reflection. He wants to apologize personally. I don't need his apology. Sarah does. That gave me pause. How is she handling this? Not well. She's staying with us temporarily. And Preston? Moved back into his childhood bedroom. He's applying for research positions, but his reputation has taken a hit. Reputations can be rebuilt. Can they? The story is everywhere, Eddie. Medical journals are writing about it. Ethics professors are using it as a case study. The case study angle hadn't occurred to me. Within a week, 3 medical schools had contacted me about speaking to their students about professional ethics and gratitude. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Scholarship incident became required reading in several medical ethics courses. More importantly, other scholarship recipients began reaching out. Students I'd helped without ever meeting them, wanting to express gratitude they'd never known they owed. Doctor. Lisa Chen, the fund's second recipient, called from her pediatric oncology fellowship. Mr. Johnson, I had no idea the scholarship came from someone who understood loss so personally. Your grades and character earned that scholarship, Doctor. But your wife's sacrifice made it possible. I just wanted you to know. I think about that every time I treat a child with cancer. That's exactly what Margaret would have wanted. The ripple effects continued expanding. City National Bank reported a 340% increase in Memorial Scholarship Fund inquiries. Apparently, my story had inspired other families to create similar programs. Preston, meanwhile, found work at a pharmaceutical research company. The pay was 60% less than his projected residency salary, but it was honest work. Dr. Rodriguez helped him negotiate a 15-year payment plan for his loans. Sarah filed for separation 6 weeks after the wedding. Not because of the financial consequences, but because of what those consequences had revealed about her husband's character. I can't stop thinking about that moment, she told me during one of our coffee meetings. The look on his face when he poured that champagne, that wasn't stress or alcohol, that was who he really is when he thinks he has power over someone. And now he's learning what it feels like to be powerless. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. 3 months later, Preston requested a meeting. Not to ask for reinstatement. He understood that door was permanently closed, but to share something he'd learned. The research lab where I work, we're developing treatments for pediatric cancers. I think about your wife every day, Eddie. About how she trusted me to care for her, and how I forgot what that meant. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. 6 months after the wedding, I established new protocols for the Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. Every scholarship recipient now receives a detailed history of the fund's origin. They know about Margaret's cancer battle. They know about the insurance money that could have secured a janitor's retirement, but instead secured their education. They know that their benefactor works night shifts and drives a Honda Civic and shops at Target. And they know that none of those facts make him worth less than anyone else. The character assessment process is now more rigorous. Recipients must complete annual community service requirements, working with underserved populations. They must demonstrate through actions rather than essays that they understand medicine as service rather than status. Most importantly, they must meet with previous scholarship recipients who've completed their training. Dr. Chen leads these meetings, sharing what she learned about gratitude and perspective. Sarah and I have dinner every Tuesday now. She's dating a high school teacher named Mike who treats servers with kindness and asks genuine questions about my work. When I told him about Margaret, he listened without trying to fix anything or offer empty platitudes. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, he said simply. She was. This scholarship program is a beautiful way to honor her. It's not just about honoring her anymore. It's about making sure future doctors understand where compassion comes from. Preston occasionally appears in the local medical community news. His research team has made promising progress on a pediatric cancer treatment. He's remarried, a social worker who specializes in helping families navigate medical crises. I don't know if he's found the compassionate Dr. Margaret believed he could become, but I hope he has. The wedding venue, Riverside Country Club, sent me a bill for champagne-stained marble. Apparently, Dom Perignon leaves marks that require professional restoration. I paid it without complaint. Some lessons are worth the cost. The most recent scholarship recipient is a young woman named Maria Santos, first in her family to attend college, working 2 jobs to support her education. When she met me to receive her award, she cried, "Mr. Johnson, why would you do this for a stranger?" Because my wife believed every patient deserves a doctor who remembers what struggle feels like. I'll never forget that. Make sure you don't. If you're watching this story, wherever you are in the world, remember, respect isn't earned through titles or bank accounts. It's given freely, or it's not respect at all. Subscribe if this resonated with you, and let me know where you're watching from, because everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are. After 3 years of silence, I received a letter from my daughter, and my heart nearly jumped out of my chest with joy. I was about to open it when my wife shouted, "Stop!" I asked, "What's wrong?" She pointed and whispered, "Can't you see?" I looked closer, and what I saw shocked me to the core. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My hands trembled as I reached for the mailbox. Something about the white envelope on top made my pulse quicken before I even saw the handwriting. 3 years of empty mailboxes had trained me not to hope, but there it was, Naomi's careful script spelling out my name. August 31st, her birthday. How could I forget? I held the envelope against the afternoon light, studying the familiar curves of her letters. The return address showed her Lincoln Park apartment, the same place where everything fell apart. My chest tightened with possibilities I'd buried long ago. "Minnie!" I called, rushing up the front steps. "Minnie, get over here, quick!" My voice cracked with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. The screen door slammed behind me as I hurried through the living room, still clutching the envelope like it might disappear. "What's all the shouting about?" Minnie appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her gray eyes immediately found the letter in my grip. "Look at this." I held it up, watching her expression change from mild annoyance to surprise. "It's from Naomi, today of all days." Minnie stepped closer, adjusting her glasses. "That's her handwriting, all right?" She touched my arm gently. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Ralph?" I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling its weight. Not heavy enough for multiple pages, but substantial. Real. After 3 years of silence, my daughter had written to me on her 38th birthday. "I keep thinking this might be it," I whispered. "Maybe she's finally ready to talk." The afternoon sun slanted through our front window, casting everything in golden light. Outside, neighbors were coming home from work, children playing in yards, the world continuing as normal. But inside our house, time had stopped. Minnie settled into the chair beside me, her presence steady and warm. "Whatever it says, we'll handle it together." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. 3 years of hoping, of failed attempts, of lying awake wondering if I'd been too harsh, too stubborn. 3 years of missing my daughter's laugh, her quick wit, the way she used to call me every Sunday just to chat. The envelope felt heavier now, loaded with possibilities. Reconciliation, forgiveness, maybe even an invitation to be part of her life again. Or perhaps another rejection, another door slammed in my face. I set it carefully on the coffee table between us, afraid to tear it open, afraid not to. The silence stretched until I could hear the kitchen clock ticking in the next room. "She remembered I'd be thinking of her today," I said finally. Minnie's hand found mine. She always was thoughtful like that. The memory hit me then, sudden and sharp, not of recent years, but of birthday mornings when Naomi was small, racing down these same stairs in her pajamas, eyes bright with anticipation. Before life got complicated, before Ethan, before everything went wrong. I picked up the envelope again, studying the careful way she'd written our address. No mistakes, no crossed-out letters. She'd taken time with this, planned it. That had to mean something good. "I can't remember the last time I felt this nervous," I admitted. "August 31st, 2022, Minnie said quietly. "The day you decided to drive over there and try to talk sense into her." The weight of that memory settled over me like a heavy blanket. That terrible afternoon that changed everything between us. But maybe today would be different. Maybe this letter would finally bridge the gap that had grown between us. I held my breath and prepared to tear open the envelope that might contain my daughter's words of forgiveness. I sank into the kitchen chair, the envelope still unopened in my hands. The familiar weight of it triggered something deep in my memory, transporting me back to that September afternoon 3 years ago when everything unraveled. I remembered standing outside Naomi's apartment building, my finger hovering over her doorbell. The Lincoln Park neighborhood bustled around me. Young professionals rushing home, couples walking dogs, the energy of a city that never slowed down. I'd driven there with such determination, convinced I could make her see reason about Ethan. The apartment buzzed me up without question. When Naomi opened her door, she looked tired in a way that worried me. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect posture slightly slumped. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, sweetheart, about your marriage." Her jaw tightened immediately. "If this is about Ethan again, it is about Ethan, and about you making the biggest mistake of your life." She stepped back, but didn't invite me in. "I'm 35 years old. I don't need relationship advice from my father. When your husband is gambling away your future, you need advice from someone who cares about you." That's when Ethan appeared behind her, his hand possessive on her shoulder. The sight of him made my stomach churn. Too smooth, too charming, The kind of man who could convince you to give him your last dollar and thank him for it. "Ralph," he said with false warmth, "what brings you by?" "I'm talking to my daughter about the casino receipts I saw in your car last month." Naomi's face went white. "You were snooping in our car?" "I was helping you move that bookshelf, and papers fell out of the glove compartment. $1,200 in one night, Naomi. How many nights like that have there been?" Ethan's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath. That was a work event. Client entertainment. "Don't lie to me, son. I know the difference between business expenses and addiction." "This is my life," Naomi exploded. "My marriage. My decisions. When are you going to stop treating me like a child?" "When you stop acting like one. This man is destroying your credit. Probably already drained your savings. You don't know what you're talking about." But I could see in her eyes that I did know. The way she couldn't quite meet my gaze, the defensive set of her shoulders, the way Ethan's grip on her shoulder tightened possessively. "What about family, Naomi? Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore?" "Family?" She laughed bitterly. "You mean the family that never accepted my choices? That questioned every decision I made? We questioned this one because we love you." "No, you questioned it because you can't control me anymore." Ethan stepped forward then, his voice silky with false concern. "Maybe it's time for some space, Ralph. Let Naomi make her own choices without interference." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. I watched my daughter's face as she absorbed his words, saw her building walls I'd never be able to scale. "He's right, Dad. I think you should leave." The words hit me like physical blows. "Naomi, please, just think about what I'm saying." "I'm thinking, and I'm choosing my husband over your suspicions." The door closed in my face with a soft click that echoed like thunder. I stood there for several minutes, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping the door would open again. It never did. Now, sitting in my kitchen 3 years later, I could still feel the weight of that rejection. The drive home had been the longest of my life. The memory of that closed door led me to remember everything that came after. 3 years of desperate attempts to bridge the gap that seemed to widen with each passing month. I'd started calling the next day, then the day after that. Voice messages that went unanswered, text messages that showed as read but never replied to. Minnie watched me wear a path in our kitchen floor, pacing with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Naomi's recorded greeting over and over. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Dad. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about yesterday. Maybe we could grab coffee and talk things through. Call me back." She never did. By October, Ethan started answering her phone. "She doesn't want to talk to you, Ralph." "Let me hear that from her." "You heard it when you drove over here uninvited and upset her. Leave us alone." The line went dead. I tried driving to her apartment twice in November. The first time, Ethan met me in the lobby, his expensive suit and practiced smile making my working man's clothes feel shabby. "This has got to stop," he said, blocking my path to the elevator. "You're causing her stress." "I'm causing her stress? What about what you're doing to her bank account?" His smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. "Careful, old man. Harassment is a serious charge." The second visit was worse. He met me at my car before I even reached the building. "I warned you," he said, pulling out his phone. "One more visit, and I'm calling the police. Naomi doesn't want to see you." Christmas was the hardest part. I'd always been the one to pick out Naomi's gifts, spending weeks finding exactly the right thing. That year I chose a beautiful leather journal, the kind she'd loved since college, with her initials embossed in gold. It came back unopened. Returned to sender, stamped across the package in red ink. My birthday cards came back the same way. Mother's Day flowers for Minnie, returned. Every attempt at connection bounced back like I was throwing stones at a brick wall. The final attempt came last spring. I'd heard through Nancy that Naomi's IT company had moved to a new building downtown. I took a sick day from work and waited in the lobby, hoping to catch her during lunch. When she appeared, walking with colleagues toward the revolving door, my heart nearly stopped. She looked thinner, tired, but still beautiful. Still my little girl. "Naomi!" She turned, and for a split second I saw something like longing in her face. Then it shuttered closed. "Dad, you can't be here." "Just 5 minutes, please. We used to be able to talk about anything." Her colleagues had stopped, sensing drama. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Ethan will be furious if he finds out you were here. Then don't tell him. This is between us. Nothing is just between us anymore. Her voice cracked slightly. I made my choice. You can unmake it. She shook her head, and I saw tears threatening. It's too late for that. She walked away without looking back, leaving me standing in a corporate lobby, surrounded by strangers who pretended not to stare. That night, I told Minnie I was done trying. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. But sitting here now, holding this unexpected letter, I felt that old hope stirring again. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe some bridges could be rebuilt after all. I stood up, carrying the letter with me as I went to find Minnie. Whatever this envelope contained, we'd face it together. I walked back through the kitchen doorway, the envelope clutched against my chest like a treasure. Minnie sat in her favorite armchair by the living room window, afternoon sunlight catching the silver threads in her hair as she worked on her crossword puzzle. Minnie? My voice came out softer than intended, reverent almost. She looked up, pencil suspended midair. Ralph, you look like you've seen a ghost. Better than a ghost? I held up the envelope, my hand trembling slightly. It's from Naomi. Today, of all days. The crossword book slipped from her lap as she stood. Are you certain? Look at the handwriting, those careful loops, the way she crosses her T's. I brought the envelope closer so she could examine it. She remembered it's her birthday. She's thinking about us. Minnie adjusted her reading glasses, studying the address with the focused attention she'd once given to student papers. It does look like hers, she said slowly, after all these years of silence. Maybe she finally understood that family is the most important thing. The hope in my own voice surprised me. Maybe Ethan's control isn't as strong as we thought. She reached for my free hand, squeezing gently. Oh, Ralph, I've missed her so much. Her laugh, the way she used to call with every little triumph at work. Remember how proud she was when they promoted her to manager? Before he poisoned her against us. The old anger tried to surface, but I pushed it down. Today was about hope, not bitterness. But this letter changes everything. She reached out first. We stood there together, both staring at the envelope that might contain our daughter's words of forgiveness. The living room felt charged with possibility, like the air before a thunderstorm that promises to wash everything clean. What do you think she says? Minnie whispered. Maybe she's pregnant. Wants to tell us about grandchildren. My imagination ran wild with possibilities. Or she left him. Realized we were right about his gambling. Or she just misses her dad. Minnie's eyes filled with tears. 38 years old today, and part of her is still our little girl who used to climb into bed with us during thunderstorms. I nodded, remembering birthday mornings filled with pancakes and torn wrapping paper, when making Naomi happy was the easiest thing in the world. Before life got complicated, before we lost each other in a maze of pride and misunderstanding. Whatever she says, we'll face it together, Minnie said, settling into the couch beside me. I positioned my finger under the envelope flap, ready to tear it open and discover what our daughter wanted to tell us after 3 years of silence. The paper felt substantial, important, real. Here goes nothing, I murmured, starting to lift the flap. Wait! Minnie's sharp voice made me freeze. My finger stopped halfway under the envelope flap, Minnie's urgent tone cutting through my excitement like a blade. Wait for what? She leaned closer, squinting at the address through her reading glasses. Give me another look at that handwriting. Minnie, what's wrong? Something's not right. She took the envelope from my hands, holding it up to the window light. Look at how she wrote your name. See the slant? I studied the letters more carefully, irritation prickling at my hope. It looks fine to me. No, Ralph. Naomi's writing always slanted to the right. Always. 30 years of grading papers taught me to notice these things. Her finger traced the letters. This slant's left. Maybe she's stressed. People's handwriting changes when they're upset. Not the fundamental slant. That's muscle memory. Minnie held the envelope at arm's length, then close again. And look at the pressure. Naomi has a heavy hand. She presses hard when she writes. These letters are too light. My chest tightened with a different kind of fear. You're imagining things. Am I? Look at this A in Ralph. Naomi makes her A's perfectly round, like little circles. This one has a pointed top. She pointed to specific letters. And she never, ever makes her F's like that. Too fancy, too many loops. Handwriting changes over time. Not this much. Not the basic letter formations. Minnie's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades analyzing student work. This person is trying to copy her style, but getting the details wrong. I wanted to argue, to defend my fragile hope, but doubt crept in like cold water. The more I looked, the more the differences became obvious. The spacing between words, the rhythm of the letters, even the way the pen had moved across the paper. It all felt foreign. But who would... I started, then stopped. I don't know. But this isn't from our daughter. The envelope suddenly felt heavy in my hands, not with promise, but with deception. Someone had gone to the trouble of imitating Naomi's handwriting, of using our pain against us. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Maybe I'm wrong, Minnie said softly, seeing the devastation on my face. Maybe she learned to write differently, or... No. The word came out flat and dead. You're right. I can see it now. The careful hope I'd built over the past 10 minutes crumbled like a house made of cards. Someone's playing games with us. We sat in silence, the envelope lying between us, like evidence of our foolishness. Outside, children were coming home from school, their laughter drifting through the window, a sound that once would have reminded me of Naomi at that age. We have to open it, I said finally. We need to know what this is about. Minnie nodded reluctantly. Whatever it is, it's not going to be good news. I tore open the envelope anyway, my hands steadier now that hope had died and been replaced by grim determination. If someone wanted to hurt us, I needed to know how and why. The paper crinkled as I unfolded it, my hands moving mechanically now that hope had curdled into dread. Minnie leaned against my shoulder, both of us peering at the single sheet of white paper. Dear Dad, I read aloud, my voice catching on the familiar word that now felt like a lie. Read it all, Minnie whispered. I cleared my throat and continued. I desperately need your help. I'm in the hospital and require emergency surgery that my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $15,000 immediately, or I might not survive. Oh my, Minnie gasped. I know we haven't talked in years, but you're the only one I can turn to. Please don't let our past disagreements prevent you from saving your daughter's life. I need you to immediately transfer the money to my cryptocurrency wallet and wallet number. The random string of letters and numbers felt like gibberish in my mouth. I looked at Minnie, whose face had gone pale. Time is critical, I continued reading. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and they won't proceed without payment. I'm sorry it took a crisis to reach out, but I'm desperate. Please help me, Dad. Your loving daughter, Naomi. The letter fell from my hands, fluttering to the coffee table like a dying bird. That's not how she talks, Minnie said immediately. She never called you Dad in letters. Always Daddy or your name. And cryptocurrency? I shook my head in disgust. Naomi works in IT. If she needed money, she'd use normal banking, not some digital nonsense I don't understand. She'd never be this formal with you either. Even when she was angry, her letters had personality. This sounds like it was written by a robot. I picked up the letter again, scanning for any detail that might feel authentic. Nothing. No mention of her job, her life, no personal touches that would prove this came from my daughter. Just a generic plea designed to extract money from a desperate father. Who does this? My voice cracked with rage. Who targets grieving parents with fake letters from their children? Someone who knows about our situation? Minnie's analytical mind was working now, past the initial shock. They knew Naomi's name, our address, that we've been estranged. This isn't random. But how could they know to use her handwriting, to send it on her birthday? We stared at each other as the implications sank in. Someone had researched us, studied our family dynamics, crafted this deception specifically to wound us where we were most vulnerable. The violation felt almost physical. $15,000, I said, reading the amount again. They really thought we'd fall for this? You were ready to tear open that envelope with pure joy 5 minutes ago, Minnie pointed out gently. If I hadn't noticed the handwriting... She didn't need to finish. I would have believed every word, would have been calling banks and trying to figure out how to send cryptocurrency to save my daughter's life. The scammer had counted on my love, my guilt, my desperate need for reconciliation. I need to call Naomi, I said, standing abruptly. Right now. I need to make sure she's safe, that this isn't connected to something worse. Minnie nodded grimly. And we need to find out who did this. I walked to the kitchen phone, my hands shaking with a different kind of energy now, not hope, but fury. Someone had weaponized my love for my daughter, and I was going to find out who. The kitchen phone sat on the counter like an old friend, black receiver worn smooth from years of family conversations. I snatched it up, my fingers automatically dialing the number I'd memorized 3 years ago but never forgotten. Come on, Naomi, pick up. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before her voicemail clicked on. That familiar voice, professional and distant now. Nothing like the warm daughter who used to call me every Sunday. Naomi, it's your father. Please call me back as soon as possible. It's important. I hung up and immediately dialed again, pacing across the linoleum floor while Minnie watched from the doorway. Same result. Voicemail again. Naomi, this is urgent. Something's happened and I need to talk to you right away. Please, sweetheart, call me back. The endearment slipped out before I could stop it, a remnant from when we still talked, when she still cared what her old man had to say. Third try. My hands were shaking now, whether from anger or anxiety I couldn't tell. Naomi, someone is using your name to try to scam us. They sent a fake letter asking for money, pretending to be you. I need to know if you're safe and if this is connected to something bigger. Call me immediately. I slammed the receiver down harder than necessary. She's not answering, I told Minnie, though that was obvious. Maybe she's at work. It's only 3:30 on a Saturday afternoon. Or maybe he won't let her answer calls from unknown numbers. The thought made my chest tighten. What if he screens all her calls, controls who she talks to? Minnie stepped closer, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Ralph, your blood pressure. You're getting worked up. Of course I'm worked up. Someone is targeting our family, using our pain to steal money, and our daughter won't even take a phone call from her father. The words came out bitter, 3 years of frustration boiling over. What are you going to do? I looked at the fake letter still lying on the kitchen counter, evidence of someone's cruelty and calculation. The cryptocurrency address seemed to mock me with its random string of letters and numbers, so impersonal, so cold. I'm driving over there. Ralph, no, you know how that ended last time. This is different. I'm not going to lecture her about her marriage. I'm going to warn her that someone is using her identity for fraud. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the back door. She has a right to know someone is impersonating her. What if she doesn't believe you? What if she thinks you made up the letter as an excuse to contact her? The possibility stopped me cold. Naomi was smart enough to consider that angle, suspicious enough after 3 years of silence to question my motives. But the alternative was doing nothing while someone used her name for criminal purposes. Then I'll show her the letter. Let her see the handwriting that isn't hers. The cryptocurrency scam, the generic medical emergency that doesn't match anything real about her life. I headed for the garage door. I can't just sit here knowing someone is targeting our family. Be careful, Ralph. Remember what the doctor said about your heart. I paused at the door, one hand on the knob. My heart's been broken for 3 years, Minnie. A little confrontation won't make it worse. The afternoon sun hit me as I backed out of the driveway, Minnie's worried face visible in the front window. Traffic was light leaving Evanston, but I knew it would get heavier as I approached the city. 45 minutes to Lincoln Park. 45 minutes to figure out what I was going to say to the daughter who'd chosen her husband over her family, who'd refused every attempt at reconciliation, who might slam the door in my face the moment she saw me standing there. But someone was using her name to hurt us, and that crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The engine hummed steadily as I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, downtown Chicago's skyline rising like concrete mountains in the distance. Saturday afternoon traffic moved at a decent pace, giving me too much time to think. Someone had studied our family dynamics carefully enough to know about the estrangement, to time the letter for Naomi's birthday, to forge her handwriting well enough to fool me initially. This wasn't some random scammer casting a wide net. This was targeted, personal, cruel. A delivery truck slowed ahead of me, forcing everyone into the left lane. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, watching Lake Michigan stretch endlessly to the east. Gray clouds were building over the water, promising rain later. The anger that had fueled my decision to drive here began mixing with familiar doubt. What if Naomi really did refuse to see me? What if she accused me of harassment, of fabricating the letter as manipulation. 3 years of silence had created a gulf that might be unbridgeable. But the alternative was worse, doing nothing while someone weaponized our family pain for profit. Traffic thickened as I approached downtown, the usual weekend congestion of tourists and shoppers heading to Navy Pier and the Magnificent Mile. I took the North Avenue exit, winding through streets that grew progressively more upscale as I entered Lincoln Park. Naomi's neighborhood represented everything she'd achieved without us: professional success, financial independence, a life carefully constructed to exclude the parents who'd raised her. The townhouses here cost more than I'd made in 5 years of engineering work. I'd driven these streets before during my failed reconciliation attempts, memorizing the route to my daughter's door. The brick facades and manicured gardens spoke of young professionals who'd made it, who belonged to a different social class than their working-class parents. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I imagined the conversation ahead. Best-case scenario, Naomi would listen, understand the threat, maybe even thank me for warning her. Worst case, she'd see this as another attempt to interfere in her life, another reason to keep me at arm's length. What if she genuinely didn't know about the letter? That seemed most likely. Why would she be involved in scamming her own parents? But then who was behind it? Ethan was the obvious suspect. But would he really stoop to forging his wife's handwriting to steal from her family? The neighborhoods changed as I drove deeper into Lincoln Park, from busy commercial streets to quieter residential blocks, lined with expensive cars and joggers in designer athletic wear. These were Naomi's people now, her chosen community of successful urbanites, who probably never dealt with the kind of working-class struggles Minnie and I had faced. I found a parking spot 2 blocks from her townhouse, feeding quarters into the meter with slightly shaking hands. The walk would give me time to prepare, to figure out exactly how to present this situation without sounding accusatory or desperate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings, and I could hear the distant sounds of a neighborhood barbecue, children playing in a nearby park. Normal Saturday activities for people with normal family relationships. Naomi's townhouse came into view, 3 stories of red brick with black shutters, a small front garden filled with flowers I didn't recognize. Expensive, tasteful, everything she'd wanted that we couldn't provide when she was growing up. Lights were on in the front windows. Someone was home. I stood at the bottom of her front steps, looking up at the burgundy door with its brass knocker and security system panel. 3 years since I'd last stood here. 3 years since she'd chosen her husband over her father's warnings. My finger hovered over the doorbell. The doorbell chimed with an elaborate melody that echoed through the townhouse. Footsteps approached, quick, light steps I remembered from childhood. The security peephole darkened as someone looked through, then went light again. A pause, then the sound of locks turning. The door opened to reveal Naomi, older now, but still unmistakably my daughter. Her dark hair was shorter than I remembered, styled in a way that made her look more sophisticated, more distant. She wore a casual dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Dad?" The word came out flat, neither welcoming nor hostile, just surprised. "Hello, Naomi." We stared at each other across the threshold, 3 years of silence stretching between us like a physical barrier. She looked healthy, which relieved me more than I wanted to admit. No signs of the emergency surgery mentioned in the fake letter. "What are you doing here?" "I need to ask you something important." I reached into my jacket pocket. "Did you write this?" I held out the letter, watching her eyes scan the familiar handwriting that wasn't quite hers. Her brow furrowed as she read, genuine confusion replacing the guarded surprise. "I didn't write this." She looked up at me sharply. "Where did you get it?" "It came in today's mail, on your birthday." "Dad, I haven't written to you in 3 years. I didn't write this letter." Her voice carried conviction, but also something else. Hurt that I would even ask, as if my question proved I didn't know her at all anymore. "Then who did? Who would forge your handwriting to ask for money?" "You tell me. You're the one who brought it here." "Naomi, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm trying to protect you. Someone used your name, your handwriting, your identity to try to scam $15,000 from your parents." The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's convenient." Her tone shifted from confused to cold. "You fabricate some letter as an excuse to show up at my house uninvited." "Fabricate?" The accusation hit me like a slap. Why would I do that? Because you've been trying to contact me for 3 years, and this was the only way left? Behind her, I caught sight of Ethan entering the hallway. He wore expensive casual clothes, the kind of weekend outfit that probably cost more than my car payment. His appearance wasn't accidental. He'd been listening. "Naomi? Who is it?" he asked, though he obviously knew. "My father. Apparently someone's been writing fake letters from me asking for money." Ethan's face showed concern, but something flickered in his eyes, too quick for me to identify. "That sounds like a scam. You should report it to the police, Ralph." "Maybe I will." I studied his face, looking for any sign that he recognized the letter. "Strange coincidence, though. $15,000. That's about what someone might lose in a really bad night at the casino." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I wouldn't know anything about that. Wouldn't you?" "Dad, that's enough." Naomi stepped protectively closer to her husband. "You can't just show up here making accusations." "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions." I looked between them, noting how Ethan's hand had moved to Naomi's shoulder. Possessive. Controlling. Someone targeted our family specifically. Someone who knew about our situation, your birthday, your handwriting style. "Anyone could find that information online these days," Ethan said dismissively. "Could they? Could they find samples of Naomi's handwriting? Could they know she's been estranged from her parents for exactly 3 years?" "Dad, you need to leave." Naomi's voice carried finality. "I didn't write that letter. I don't know who did, and I can't help you figure it out." "Can't? Or won't?" "Both." She started to close the door. "Don't come here again without calling first." "I tried calling 3 times. You didn't answer." "Then maybe take the hint." The door closed with a soft but definitive click, leaving me standing on the front step with more questions than answers. I'd accomplished nothing except confirming that Naomi genuinely didn't know about the letter, but Ethan's reaction bothered me. Too defensive, too eager to end the conversation. I walked slowly back to my car, the fake letter still in my pocket, feeling like I'd missed something important. The lock clicked behind me with such finality that I almost turned around to knock again. But Naomi had made her position clear. She didn't want to see me, didn't believe me, and thought I'd fabricated the letter as manipulation. Walking back to my car felt like moving through thick water, each step heavier than the last. The golden evening light that had seemed hopeful during my drive here now felt mocking, illuminating my failure in harsh detail. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, watching Naomi's townhouse shrink in my rearview mirror. 3 years of hoping for reconciliation, and I'd managed to make things worse. She probably thought I was getting desperate in my old age, creating elaborate schemes just to force contact. Traffic moved slowly on Lakeshore Drive, giving me too much time to replay the conversation. Something about Ethan's behavior bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The way he'd appeared so quickly behind Naomi, like he'd been listening, the slight tenseness in his voice when he suggested reporting the letter to police, the protective way he'd stood with his hand on her shoulder. Most telling was his reaction when I mentioned casino gambling. Just a flicker, barely noticeable. But I'd spent 40 years as an engineer, learning to notice when something didn't fit properly. By the time I reached Evanston, instead of turning toward home, I found myself pulling into Dawes Park, the same place where I used to bring Naomi when she was small, where we'd feed ducks and talk about everything and nothing. The bench I chose overlooked the pond, now empty of ducks, but still peaceful in the fading light. I pulled out the fake letter again, studying it with fresh eyes. Minnie had been right about the handwriting. Too many small details were wrong. But whoever wrote this knew enough about our family to target us, specifically. $15,000. The exact amount someone might need to cover gambling debts accumulated over months of bad luck at Chicago's casinos. Someone who had access to samples of Naomi's handwriting, who knew about our estrangement, who understood exactly which emotional buttons to push. Someone who lived in the same house as my daughter. The more I thought about it, the more Ethan's behavior made sense. His eagerness to end the conversation, his defensiveness when I mentioned casinos, the way he'd positioned himself between Naomi and me like a barrier. He wasn't protecting her from an unwelcome father. He was protecting himself from exposure. A cool breeze rustled the trees, carrying the first hint of autumn's approach. Change was coming. whether any of us wanted it or not. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my pocket. Evidence. Not of Naomi's betrayal, but of someone else's desperation and manipulation. Someone who thought he could use our family's pain for his own financial salvation. The park was growing quiet as families gathered their children and headed home for dinner. Normal families who talked to each other, who didn't have years of silence to bridge, who didn't have to worry about fraud and manipulation tearing them apart. But we weren't a normal family anymore. We were a damaged one, held apart by someone who benefited from our separation. Someone who needed us to stay angry and distant because reconciliation would mean exposure. Standing up from the bench, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Not hope exactly, but determination. Ethan had made a mistake today. He'd shown his hand just enough for someone paying attention to notice. I walked back to my car, already planning what I'd tell Minnie. We needed to wait and watch. If Ethan had written that letter, he'd probably made other mistakes too. Desperate people usually did. The drive home took only 5 minutes, but it felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into light. For the first time since the divorce, I had a target for my anger that wasn't my own daughter. 3 days passed like slow torture. Minnie and I discussed the situation endlessly, analyzing every detail of my confrontation with Naomi, every suspicious reaction from Ethan. We decided to wait, to let things develop naturally rather than pushing harder and risk making everything worse. Tuesday evening arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched my mood. Minnie was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. "I'll get it," I called, expecting maybe a neighbor or delivery driver. The last person I anticipated seeing was my daughter, standing on the front porch, soaking wet from the rain, clutching a manila folder against her chest. "Naomi?" "Dad, I need to talk to you." Her voice cracked slightly. "I found something terrible." She looked like she'd been crying. Her usually perfect hair hung limp around her face, and her expensive clothes were wrinkled as if she'd thrown them on without care. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They held the same desperate clarity I'd seen in the mirror 3 years ago. "Come in, sweetheart. You're soaking." I stepped aside, watching her shake rain droplets from her jacket. Minnie appeared in the hallway, took one look at Naomi's distressed state, and immediately shifted into maternal mode. "Oh, honey, what's wrong? Let me get you a towel." "I'm fine, Minnie. Naomi opened the manila folder with trembling hands. "Dad, look at these papers. I found them in Ethan's desk." She spread several sheets across the coffee table. Even from across the room, I could see what they were. Practice sheets filled with handwriting exercises. Row after row of attempts to copy familiar letter formations. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though my heart was already racing. "Practice sheets. He was trying to copy my handwriting." Her voice broke completely. "Dad, look at this one." She pointed to a sheet covered with attempts at writing her own name, her address, even what looked like draft versions of the fake letter I'd received. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "I found these yesterday when I was looking for our insurance papers. They were hidden in a folder marked business expenses." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I confronted him about it last night." "What did he say?" "At first he denied everything. Said they weren't his, that maybe someone planted them." She laughed bitterly. "But when I pressed him, when I threatened to call you and ask if you'd really received a letter, he confessed." He broke down completely. "Dad, he has gambling debts. Serious ones. He's been going to the casino in Hammond 3-4 times a week for months. He owes money to people who aren't patient about collecting." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Ethan's nervousness during my visit, his eagerness to get rid of me, his defensive reaction to any mention of gambling. It all made perfect sense now. "He targeted you because he knew about our estrangement," Naomi continued. "He thought you'd be so desperate to hear from me that you'd send money without asking too many questions." "How much does he owe?" $37,000. The number fell between us like a stone. The letter asking for $15,000 was just the first payment. He planned to send more letters, different medical emergencies, until he got enough to cover his debts. I sat down heavily, the full scope of Ethan's manipulation finally clear. He hadn't just been a bad husband. He'd been systematically using our family's pain for his own criminal purposes. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Naomi's tears started flowing again. "You were right about him 3 years ago. You tried to warn me, and I chose him over you. I let him convince me that you were trying to control my life when you were actually trying to protect me." "Sweetheart?" "No, let me finish. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the signs. You and Minnie are the only people in the world who would never lie to me or hurt me, and I threw that away because a manipulator told me I should." Minnie moved to sit beside her on the couch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "The important thing's that you found out the truth." "I'm filing for divorce," Naomi said firmly. "Tomorrow. I can't stay married to someone who would try to steal money from my parents by pretending to be me." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years, and saw not the defensive woman who'd shut me out, but the strong, intelligent person Minnie and I had raised. She'd been manipulated and isolated, but she hadn't been broken. "Can you forgive me?" she whispered. I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I just held out my arms. She fell into them like she was 12 years old again, and for the first time in 3 years, my family was whole. "Come on, both of you," Minnie said, standing up and smoothing her apron. "Let's sit down properly and talk about this over a meal. I was just making pot roast. There's plenty for 3. We moved into the kitchen together, and I watched Minnie automatically set a third place at our small table. The simple domesticity of the moment, plates and silverware, the smell of dinner, my daughter sitting in the chair she'd occupied as a child, felt like a miracle. "I can't believe I let him isolate me from you for so long," Naomi said, accepting the plate Minnie placed before her. "He was so subtle about it, always finding reasons why I couldn't visit, why phone calls were inconvenient, why you two were trying to manipulate me." "Professional manipulators are good at their work," I said. "Don't blame yourself for being deceived by an expert." But the signs were there. The secrecy about money, the way he controlled my schedule, how he always had an explanation for why my family was the problem. She pushed food around her plate absently. "He made me believe that choosing him meant proving my independence." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "The important thing is that you saw through it eventually. I should have seen through it 3 years ago when you tried to warn me. Should have, could have, would have." Minnie's voice carried the practical wisdom of decades. "None of that matters now. What matters is moving forward." I stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept matches. "Speaking of moving forward, there's something we need to do." I pulled out the fake letter, now wrinkled from being carried around for days. "This thing has caused enough damage to our family." Understanding immediately, Naomi nodded. We moved to the kitchen sink, all 3 of us crowding around the basin. I struck a match and held the flame to one corner of the letter. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening as it burned. "Good riddance," Naomi whispered, watching the last traces of Ethan's deception wash down the drain. With the letter destroyed, Minnie disappeared into the living room and returned carrying a thick photo album, the one filled with pictures from Naomi's childhood. She opened it to a page showing a gap-toothed 8-year-old Naomi at a Cubs game, grinning between her parents. "Remember this day?" Minnie asked. "You insisted on getting a hot dog at every inning." "And Dad kept buying them for me, even though I only ate half of each one." Naomi laughed, the first genuine laughter I'd heard from her in years. We spent the next hour looking through photos, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings, family vacations and quiet Sunday afternoons. Each picture was proof that we'd been a loving family once, that the bonds between us were stronger than any manipulator could permanently break. "I've missed this so much," Naomi said, touching a picture of herself at 16, rolling her eyes at something I'd said. "I've missed having parents who actually cared about my well-being instead of what they could get from me." "You'll always have that," I said firmly. "No more years of silence. We stay in touch from now on, no matter what." "Never again," she promised. "And Dad, I want to write you a real letter, next week when things settle down. A real letter in my real handwriting, telling you everything I've wanted to say for 3 years." The contrast was perfect. From fake communication designed to steal money to genuine connection meant to rebuild love. It felt like the universe correcting itself. "What about Ethan?" Minnie asked practically. "Where will you stay during the divorce proceedings?" "I've already moved out," Naomi said. "I'm staying at a hotel for now, but I was hoping—" She looked between us uncertainly. Could I maybe stay in my old room for a few weeks, just until I find my own place? Sweetheart, this is your home, I said. It always has been. We just lost you for a while. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes together, the three of us moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronization, I marveled at how quickly the natural rhythms of family life reasserted themselves. It was as if the 3 years of separation had been a bad dream, dissolved by truth and honesty. Later, as Naomi settled into her old bedroom, I stood in the doorway watching her organize her things. She looked younger somehow, freed from the weight of maintaining a marriage built on lies and manipulation. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly. "Never," I replied. "Family doesn't give up. That's what makes it family." Outside, rain continued falling, washing the world clean for tomorrow. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.